Hi and welcome back to the channel. Once upon a time when the world was young and dinosaurs ruled the earth, there was a thing called television. This is way before there was Netflix and Hulu and Paramount and Luna and all the other streaming services. You know about it, you were there, you're older than oxygen. So let's talk about some cult TV shows that I really enjoy. There are going to be some deep cuts here. There are going to be some that you'll only be able to find if you have a multi-region DVD player and a little bit of cash in your pocket. But we'll give it a go. We'll see what's there and get your pen and paper handy. And I'll get this over with at the start. If you enjoy these videos, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button, hitting the notification bell, and leaving a comment and telling me which of these series you liked. And if you have any others that you want to tell me about, don't tell me about Blake 7, because everyone tells me about Blake 7 every time I do one of these videos. Yes, Blake 7 exists. So I'll put down the remote and we'll get on with it. This one's from 2000. It's a weird format because it's an action comedy with a half-an-hour format, which made 24-hour episodes, which by my calculation means 12 hours of them. So you can binge these buggers in a day if you have a lot of beef jerky and beer. It's a series called Jack of All Trades, starring Bruce Campbell. Now, if you haven't heard of this one, it's fun.
Open the door, Jack. It's Thomas Jefferson.
The president? Your uncle?
It was about time he found out I'm not a little girl.
Are you out of your mind?
Jack, what's going on in there?
It's a rollicking adventure. Bruce Campbell has to deal with pirates and all sorts of things. There's a little bit of kind of anachronistic stuff, so there are technologies above and beyond what they had in the 1700s. But it's all tongue-in-cheek silliness. Bit ridiculous, but it's in times like these where things are a bit hard, you want to go silly, and Jack of All Trades is above all else silly. It's got weird things in it, like there are a few episodes, actually set in the 1800s, come to think of it. There are a few episodes where Napoleon Bonaparte is played by Vern Troyer. That shows you the level of this kind of thing. But I recommend it because it's fun, it's silly, and it is just, you know, a little bit of froth to have some fun with. Next one. This one, of course, has been retconned and reiterated in modern times to great success. But I'm going old school in this one because this is a lot of fun. I think it really does need to be more respected than it is. And it's superhero stuff, so it's very much on the kind of wet tip of the zeitgeist right now. So here is the original Flash TV series. With John Wesley Shipp and Amanda Pays and Alex Desert, created by Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo, who are some really great creators. They did things like Zone Troopers. I've talked about that movie before. And they also, I think, worked on the Trances, though I may be wrong. But either way, the original Flash, I've got a lot of time for. The special effects were as good as you can expect at that time. And you also get Mark Hamill playing the Riddler in one of his first leading roles. And I said that deliberately. But yeah, I like the Flash. I like John Wesley Shipp's interpretation of it. He's turned up in the new Flash as well, playing his version of Barry Allen from an alternate universe. But I've got a lot of time for him, and I just like this one. I like the rollicking theme music they've got. I think it's Danny Elfman did the theme music for The Flash. But if you haven't checked that one out, or haven't checked it out lately, it's definitely worth doing. Because even though some of the special effects are a little janky from 21st century viewpoints, it's still incredibly entertaining. I'm just grabbing these in the order that they're piled up here, so thematically there's not going to be any continuity between these things. This one was an incredible cult in Australia in the 1960s, which enormously pissed off all of our uncles and aunts and grandparents because they'd lived through World War II. It's a TV series about a samurai whose best friend is a ninja, and it's The Samurai. From about 1964, it turned up on Australian television, and it is great. It's got basic special effects. It's got some janky dubbing, but it is, if you're an Australian who grew up at a certain time in history, this one is a TV series you went home to watch after school every day, because you wanted to see ninjas throwing shurikens, you wanted to see people fighting with katanas, you wanted to see people throwing smoke bombs and disappearing. It's got all of that stuff. I've only got this season 1 thing, which is the first story in season 1. But there are more of them out there, and I think it's about time a box set of these came out again, because I really want to buy it, and prices that these things are going for on eBay are egregiously ridiculous. But if you can find episodes of The Samurai, starring Koichi Ose as Shintaro the Samurai, it's a good watch. It's fun. It's one of those internationalist kind of things at a time when there was a lot of racism against Japanese people in Australia particularly, and there were a lot of Australians still around who have been in internment camps in Asia, and particularly Singapore at the time. It was controversial at the time, but it was incredibly popular with young people who hadn't lived through that stuff. So there's a lot of kind of social history involved in The Samurai, but it's a recommend from me. And this one's from New Zealand. This one is from New Zealand, so kia ora to all of my Kiwi friends. It's a series that looks at Norse mythology from an interesting viewpoint. It's called The Almighty Johnsons, which, yeah, I know it sounds like, dicks, but it isn't. The Almighty Johnsons is a story of a family, the Johnsons, who live in near Auckland in New Zealand, a bunch of brothers and sisters and cousins and people like that, who are all reincarnations of Norse gods.
Get in the van, Axel.
I know it's freaky, but what you need to get your head around is that your family are all gods.
Gods.
Norse gods.
I'm going to glue his cock to his stomach.
Well, at least I do more. If you...
Hold it over your head.
What for?
For the lightning bolt.
Who are you?
One of those who will stop you.
You know how they say love's a bitch? That's me.
Get yourself inside your old bed before you catch your death of cold.
Now this runs a couple of series. This is series 1, but there are a few series of this. I think there are 3 series. They mix up Norse mythology with it. They also mix up Maori mythology in there. There are some Maori gods that turned up as well. And it's all done in a kind of suburban milieu. So they're in New Zealand. They've got to deal with it. Loki's there. There are a whole bunch of Norse gods and Norse demons in there. There's a lot of mythology thrown into it on a fairly sparse budget. But The Almighty Johnsons, if you can find it, is really great. Maybe on a streaming service if you look around. But this is a recommend from me. Really good acting, really interesting stuff, and also quite humorous. So give The Almighty Johnsons a call. This one is the deepest cut I've got here, I think. It's an Australian TV series from the 1960s, just when spy stuff was really, really big. It was made by Crawford Productions, who made a lot of kind of police and justice kind of shows in Australia in the 60s and 70s. They had a series called Homicide. They had Division 4. They had a whole bunch of them. And this one was their go at having a spy series from the late 1960s. And it's called Hunter.
It's intriguing espionage with secret agent John Hunter. Part commando, part detective, part spy.
I'm convinced he's a playboy. I'm not convinced he's harmless.
No, it's just I'm in the middle of the usual last-minute frantic rush to the office.
Starring Gerard Kennedy and Tony Ward. It's basically a fairly low-budget action series. Well, actually, it was a high budget for Australia at the time, but relatively low budget. It's in black and white. Each one's got like a 4 or 5 episode arc, and there are 1 or 2 episodes that are missing, but they do have kind of synopses of those episodes. Filmed in Melbourne and also in Singapore and Sydney and the Gold Coast, so they travelled around, which was something new for Australian television at the time. It was very location based in one place for the most part. But Hunter, who is a agent for SCU 3, which is Special Clandestine Unit 3 of a government agency called Cosmic, who looks at threats, mostly communist threats, to Australia. And there are cars getting blown up. There's a bit where some people go scuba diving and someone throws a whole bunch of meat into the water to attract sharks. There are all sorts of wild and weird little things. This one I got directly from Crawford's, who aren't kind of letting other people into their intellectual property, much to, I think it's a bad business move. But it was good getting this one. The quality of the video isn't great because I think it's telecine, but you get to see lots of places that I know quite well, like Port Melbourne, as they were in the 1960s. Now, Port Melbourne's all high-rises and posh people now, and it was an industrial area in the 1960s, so it was really great seeing it looking like that. It's still good storytelling. It's still got some good acting in it. It's a lot of fun, and I kind of enjoyed revisiting it. Picked it up, I think, for $40 from Crawford's themselves, and there's a few other things they've got there from their production house, but they're a lot more prosaic than Hunter. I think Hunter is the grooviest of what they have to offer right at this stage, so I enjoyed re-watching that. 1960s British television, which is always popular. This one's about a Victorian era swashbuckler detective kind of guy who is frozen by his arch enemy and wakes up in groovy 1960s London. Of course, it's Adamant Lives. Now, this one I like. It's got a good theme song. It's kind of very much in the style of things like The Avengers, the original Avengers with Patrick McNee and Honor Blackman and Diana Rigg. And I think it went one season. It's crazy kind of 60s camp in a sense. There's sword fighting, there's evil villains, there's all sorts of really fun stuff in there. You don't have to have watched this originally to enjoy it now. You can enjoy it as a historical artifact. It really is something that I really liked revisiting. I think I'd seen one episode of it back in the day, or maybe I'd seen it on, somebody had shown it at a convention or something. But it's very groovy. This is the complete collection, it says here. And I might well dive into that one again because I haven't watched it for a couple of years. But Adamant Lives is a lot of fun. And again, it's a deep cut cult series from the 1960s. Moving right along, I'm going to do 2 series from Australia. And then I'm going to end on a British deep cut spy series that went 4 episodes. The 2 series on television, for Australian television. Going to do this one first because I loved it in the day. I actually went to see this particular ensemble in concert at the Sydney Opera House. The only time I've seen any kind of concert in the Sydney Opera House was with this mob. And it's a comedy series made by the ABC in the 1970s. Transgressive at the time, satirical as hell. The Auntie Jack Show.
Hello, me little lovelies. This is your Queen speaking from my secret headquarters in Wollongong. My Arthur and I would like to warn you that the whole world has been gobbled up by the terrible colour television monster.
Starring Graham Bond as Auntie Jack, a great big lady with a mustache and a boxing glove who rides a Harley Davidson around and has adventures with her team, who started out being narrator Neville, played by John Derham, Kid Eager, played by Gary McDonald, who later went on to be Norman Gunston and had a great career as a character actor, and Rory O'Donoghue as Thin Arthur. Now, after the first season, John Derham dropped out to do a TV series called The True Blue Show. And instead of him, we got... Actually, I got that wrong. Kid Eager came in the second season. In the first and second seasons, there's the one female who dresses as a superhero, and her name is Flange Desire. There's ongoing recurring characters. There's madness, there's satire, there's a whole thing where they satirise the Australian Army by talking about World War II, the World War II Australian Army precision dancing team.
You've got to walk through the minefield.
Walk through the minefield?
Sing through the minefield.
Sing through the minefield?
Yes, dance through the minefield.
That's a madman.
I'm going to dance through the minefield, prance through the minefield, sing through the minefield all the way.
Who dance through minefields and things like that and camp it up enormously. They were kind of... The whole series, when you look at it in a whole, it's very funny. There's a whole bunch of really hilarious comedy skits in it. But what it's doing is it's deconstructing and challenging the 1970s narrative about Australian male masculinity. You've got Auntie Jack, a cross-dressing old lady who sounds like a guy with a mustache and a boxing glove. You've got the camp army people. You've got Neil and Errol, a couple of guys who sing little tunes together. So the whole series basically challenges masculinity at a time where a lot of people didn't like that. And it became very, very controversial at the time. They've also got a butcher who's a heavy metal rock star. All sorts of different weird little characters in this one. And it holds up pretty well. Yeah, there's the other volume, the Auntie Jack Show. I don't think it's culturally exclusive, so I think that you will get a lot out of it even if you didn't grow up in the Australian culture. But it's good fun, good entertainment, lots of silliness, and it's part of the history of Australian comedy. And there are songs in there as well. There's the Auntie Jack theme song, which became a hit here in Australia. They even did a picture disc of it. They did a couple of albums of the music from the series as well. It's really a cultural icon in Australia, and I think people overseas might get a kick out of it as well. Now, this other one I'm doing because I got reminded about it on Twitter the other day, because the star of this series and I were chatting on Twitter about Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and we were swapping Yu-Gi-Oh gifts for a little while there. His name's Hunter Page Lockhart, and the series is an Australian superhero series using Indigenous culture and Indigenous mythologies as the background. There are 2 seasons of it. It didn't get enough love. It's challenging to get into the mythology and the world of it a little bit. Set in the near future in Australia, and it's called Clever Man. Now, Clever Man is an Australian Indigenous phrase, basically saying somebody who's a wizard in the culture, who's a force for good in a sense, a cultural elder. I'm probably explaining that really badly, and I apologise to any Indigenous viewers for that. But basically, Hunter Page Lockhart plays the hero who runs a club in Sydney, and it's set slightly in the future where there's a new human species just been discovered called the Hairies, who are very much an oppressed minority and are hunted down by an authoritarian government. The Hairies are hairy people. They're stronger. They're more long-lived than human beings. And they are being experimented on by a bunch of scientists led by Ian Glenn. It's got some really interesting themes in it about Aboriginal disenfranchisement, about colonisation, about all of those issues which Australia is talking about now. But it's in the format of a dramatic superhero series. If you haven't seen Clever Man, I believe it is streaming on a number of streaming services, not only here but overseas. But one of the things I did chat with Hunter Page Lockhart about on Twitter was the fact that it's not available in Australia on a streaming service at the moment. And I said to him, yeah, that's why I buy physical media. I want these series. I want to be able to appreciate them. And I want to be able to really recommend them to other people, but I don't want them to disappear into the ether the way that things do when they drop off streaming services. But I want to keep these ones, and I think they're important from the history of Australian television. I think they're part of the conversation we're having now about Indigenous issues and Indigenous rights. And they're also really, really entertaining, incredibly well acted. Deborah Mailman's in there as well, Rob Collins, Francis O'Connor, Ian Glenn. The acting in there is great. They filmed a lot of it down near the Everleigh Arts Centre in Sydney, which used to be a railway yard, and where there's a really good farmers market when lockdowns aren't happening. But I like Clever Man. I'm going to revisit that one soon too, because I think that the first time I absorbed it, I know more about Indigenous culture now than I did then, so I'll probably get a little bit more out of it. But it can take you down a rabbit hole of learning about things that really should have been taught in schools when I was a kid, but never were. So the last one's a deep cut British spy series from the mid-1960s, which is an absurdist comedy. Basically, that's the only way to say it. It reads like a Harold Pinter play. There's some very funny dialogue in it. There's some really weird characters in it. It's about a government department, which is a spy department, run by a guy called Kronk, played by John Sharp. And his arch enemy is a Persian millionairess called Siri Van Epp, played by Elizabeth Shepherd. It's also got an American-style private eye working out of London. It's got just a whole bunch of weird characters, and it's called The Corridor People.
Anything to report?
Not a thing.
Not one single bloody thing. Thank you very much. I want you to find Phil Scotty.
Scotty? I thought he was dead enough to bury.
The news was apparently premature.
Trust Scotty. Or better still, don't.
Scotty's death was an elaborate hoax, and I want you to find out why. Find out who fixed the fake funeral, who paid for it, who managed it, and then find Scotty.
What do you think, Sergeant?
It's a living.
Now, if you haven't seen The Corridor People, it's really hard to describe. There are only 4 episodes, and the 4 episodes are Victim as Birdwatcher, Victim as Whitebait, Victim as Red, and Victim as Black, they're called. There's hang on, let me get this out here, because I'll show you the kind of style of the series. There is Elizabeth Shepherd playing Siri Van Epp. There's a cover in a little more clearly. It's one of those series that's too good to stay. It's so off the wall and so off the radar of what most people were expecting from a 1960s spy series. There are times when the TV series The Avengers, the John Steed, Emma Peel one, became absurdist, but what this series did was it took that to 11 and then supercharged it with a nitro tank. It is really weird. The characters overact. It's very stagey feeling, but it is mad fun. I've rewatched 2 of the 4 episodes so far yesterday, and it's one of those series where you carefully watch the dialogue, you carefully watch the way people are acting and things like that. There are minimalist sets on it, but the minimalist sets are really well designed and are really great for the action. There's a few scenes filmed outdoors. There's a bit where a guy is brought back from the dead. He's a rich man. And he sits on a park bench and talks to a random stranger about how he's scared to go home because his wife is much younger than he is. And coming back from the dead, he'd be really embarrassed to go and see her again. He eventually does. But there's a little bit of feel of Waiting for Godot in this dialogue between him and a really weird old man sitting on the park bench who breaks the 4th wall. This is just mad shit. And The Corridor People is something that you should really check out if you haven't already. I like it a lot. It's unlike anything else that I've seen in a television format, and that's a good thing. So anyway, that's it for this time around. Thanks for going on that journey through the DVD box sets. They're all deep cuts from what I can see. Maybe The Flash isn't, but for me it's something that really should be shouted out again. Anyway, look after yourselves, stay safe, and you all know what that means. Watch some great TV, watch some new TV, watch some old TV, watch some off-the-wall mad gonzo TV as well. And I'll catch you next time.